Welcome back. The number of Israeli settlers in the Palestinian territories has rocketed since 1967, when occupying the West Bank was an important strategic gain for Israel. And the settlements that dot the West Bank, Gaza and East Jerusalem kept growing. Between 1967 and 1982, 21,000 people moved into the West Bank and Gaza. By 1990, there were a total of 76,000 settlers. And by 2000, there were more than 383,000, including those in East Jerusalem. Israel pulled out of the settlements in Gaza in 2005, and today there are nearly 400,000 settlers in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Currently, more than 200,000 settlers live in Jerusalem, and the number is likely to increase. Our guests in this edition of Inside Story are from Jerusalem, Khalil Tafakci, Amos Asael, and Danny Seideman. Mr. Seideman, you were quoted as saying, if you would bear with me, I quote, "Some people in the Israeli left and Palestinians feel we have already reached the point of no return and the two-state solution is no longer possible. I don't buy that. But if the E1 area and other neighborhoods in South Jerusalem are built, I believe then the two-state solution will be jeopardized to such an extent that there will be no Palestinian state. If there's no Palestinian state, ultimately there will be no Jewish state." What do you mean by that, sir?
I believe that the soul of both national movements, the Jewish national movement and the Palestinian national movement, is self-determination. I've been working on these issues for the last 17 years exclusively in Jerusalem, issues between Israelis and Palestinians. And if there's one conclusion that I have is that Israelis and Palestinians do not aspire to share a political community. We want to separate from one another. Consequently, I am in favor of the establishment of a Palestinian state. It is the only way that my state, Israel, and I'm a proud Israeli, will have the security it deserves. I'm a Jerusalemite. I want my city, Jerusalem, to be recognized as the capital of Israel. And the one person in this conversation that holds the key to that is Khalil Tafakci, because only when the Palestinians have Al-Quds recognized as their state will I receive my own legitimacy. In order for a Palestinian state and an Israeli state to live side by side, there must be a viability to that state. There must be geographical contiguity. There must be vitality. And the settler enterprises threatens to balkanize the conflict to such an extent as to make a viable Palestinian state impossible. By creating settlements, whether it's in East Jerusalem or in the West Bank, Israel is not expanding itself, it's undermining its own existence.
Amos Asael, do you agree with Mr. Seideman? Because many are saying they expect the strengthening of settlements by Israel, like Ma'ale Adumim, which basically bisect the West Bank.
Well, here's once again the whole tragedy. We're discussing symptoms rather than roots. The problem is not right now, unfortunately, the problem is not at this stage where exactly physically a future border passes. Of course, that's a very important aspect of the situation come its day. But right now the problem is not about physics, it's about chemistry. The problem is about acceptance. The problem is about the very acquiescence with the Jewish legitimacy of Jewish statehood in the Jewish ancestral land. This is what I see here.
60 years have passed. Surely you have to talk about borders at some stage.
I would love to talk about borders. I've done that, in fact. When Ehud Barak back in summer 2000 was negotiating down very minutely to that kind of level on maps at Camp David, in the presence of Bill Clinton with Yasser Arafat himself, the future borders, I supported him emphatically in writing in public. I'm past that point. My problem is with what transpired subsequently.
Mr. Tafakci, Egypt's Al-Ahram newspaper has said that the consolidation of a greater Jerusalem as the capital for Israel will further complicate final status negotiations and could render the two-state solution obsolete. What do you think about that?
Yes, because if the Israel expand the border of East Jerusalem and the Jerusalem, and we became what we call it metropolitan Jerusalem or greater Jerusalem, it means that it has two aims. One of them, they change the demography inside this area, and the second, divided north of West Bank and south of West Bank. It means that Ma'ale Adumim until the Jordan Valley will be expanded, all settlement, Ma'ale Adumim, and block of Ma'ale Adumim will be annexed for Jerusalem. It means that it's very complicated because there is a divided West Bank for two pieces, and the second, there is no geographic continuity, there is no state for Palestine, because everything will be under Israel control. And everybody knows that East Jerusalem will be the capital of Palestinian state. So I think that if Israel expand the border, and my colleague Israel speaking about the borders, I think that the geopolitics of Jerusalem is very complicated, especially for if we speak about Greater Jerusalem, or what we call it Metropolitan Jerusalem.
Danny Seideman, back to the issue of Kerem Hamufti in particular. Khalil Tafakji was not very optimistic about a possible Supreme Court ruling. How do you foresee the Supreme Court ruling?
No, Supreme Courts don't like to deal with the radioactive issues at any given moment. The United States Supreme Court never ruled on the legality of the Vietnam War. They're only beginning to deal with the Guantanamo detention center now. Jerusalem is a radioactive issue, one should always be cautious. But I have been following the Mufti Grove legal situation for the last 17 years. My first document goes way back to the documents that Khalil referred to in 1990. I can tell you that the illegality of this move screams to high heaven. And I believe that the excellent attorneys, Elias Khoury, for example, of the Palestinian landowners, provides, I think, a very decent case in stopping this. There's also another element. In 1995, the Israeli government made an undertaking to the Clinton administration: no more expropriations. Israel, as I said, has expropriated 35% of East Jerusalem. I think it would be very interesting to see whether the Bush administration takes seriously undertakings made in 1995, even if it was to a Clinton administration.
Amos Osail, do you believe that the Bush administration is insincere in being an honest broker between Israelis and Palestinians?
No, of course it's sincere, but it's also desperate. It's very nice to do what Mr. Seideman has just said and focus on expropriations. Of course, there is the other minor detail of the Palestinian failure to abide by its own commitments not to ever resort to violence again. Back in 1993, that too was violated. And I lament everything over here. This is not the problem. Peering now into documents and looking at the minute details of the way their T's were crossed and their I's were dotted will really not lead us far. The problem begins with a very willingness for peace, and the absence of that willingness is what creates the vacuums out of which indeed sprout the kind of bad phenomena that we're discussing here.
All right, Amos Osail, I'm going to have to interrupt you. I'm sorry, sir. I'm going to have to interrupt you because it's just about time to thank you all. We have run out of time. Danny Seideman, Khalil Tafakji, and Amos Osail, all from Jerusalem. Thank you very much for shedding light on this particular issue, and thank you so much for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.